Deontay, are you frozen?
I am not. I just stepped away for a second. I'm good.
Okay, go ahead and go because we've been live.
Oh, okay. Well, hopefully the people didn't see. No, I wasn't doing that. Hold on a second. Let me get my things in order real quick. All right, how's everybody doing? My name is Dr. Deontay Hollowell, and I would like to welcome you all to the 2022 Sankofa series. This is session 1. And just to give you a little bit of background about the Sankofa series in case you're not familiar, the series was started by myself and Sister Chanel back in late 2020 as a result of the social unrest and protest movement that went on right here locally in Louisville as a result of the killing, murder of Breonna Taylor, and then the eventual also murder of David McAtee and other police injustices. And the purpose for us to be here is for us to discuss various facets of the way in which policing affects the lives of Black people, specifically in the United States. And so each week, each installment, we'll look at a various issue regarding policing in our Black communities with the hopes of coming up with solutions that that we can undertake in the grassroots to try to make our lives better. One of the things that we recognize is that while it's one thing to fight for justice and even expect it, it's another thing to go out there and just get it for yourself. And that's what we're on here. So we appreciate the people out there who have joined us, whether it's via stream or Facebook or whatever else people have chosen to use. But so to get started today, our first session will begin with a conversation about wanton endangerment and community violence. Hey, Chanel.
Mm-hmm.
Did you, am I able to show the video?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, I don't need to show it yet anyway. But I'll ask again if that time becomes appropriate to see if we can get this video that I pulled up to show up. So I wanted to start off today, Chanel, by really just asking the question, and this is kind of how I will approach it each week, is by asking the question of operationalization. What that means is, um, as far as wanton endangerment goes, what does that term even mean? What do we mean when we say it? And then is that anything, excuse me, significantly different than the legalese, the legal terminology, and what that means? And I think that's very important for us to really understand, because oftentimes the law is left up to interpretation. And so if you are a person who is being charged with a criminal act, and let's just say you didn't know that your act was criminal, well, that doesn't disallow the police from arresting you, or the courts from charging you. And so it's very important that we as Black people, especially us that's out here fighting in these streets for freedom, it's very important that we know the law. And you can take that back to the Black Panthers, and a lot of activist folks who would walk around with the Constitution in their pocket, and people thought that it was a joke, but it's real. And so, with that being said, wanton endangerment has been defined as, in Kentucky specifically, as one engaging in conduct that creates substantial danger or serious physical injury or death to another person. I want to read that part again, and I want folks out there to pay attention to the three scenarios that we talk about. So, again, under Kentucky law, wanton endangerment is the act of engaging in a criminal conduct or in a conduct that creates substantial danger of serious physical injury or death to another person. So danger, injury, or death is what's at stake when we're talking about wanton endangerment. The statute also states that the conduct under circumstance, excuse me, the conduct is under circumstance that manifests an extreme indifference to the value of human life. So in other words, whatever the conduct is that is engaged in by that person, if it is thought to be a result of an extreme indifference to the value of human life, then that act could very well be considered wanton endangerment. So really, in layman's terms, and then we'll get into some more of the legal stuff, but in layman's terms, we're talking about an act that's reckless, an act that doesn't consider other people that may be hurt, or that may be in danger, or that may even die because of what someone has done. And so first degree wanton endangerment is considered in Kentucky a Class D felony, and it could be you could be sentenced up to 5 years for each charge, and receive a fine of up to $1,000 if you are 10,000, my bad, if you are convicted. Now, another thing that we have to pay close attention to, y'all, is unfortunately, when a civilian commits a crime or is accused, that is not always the same as if a police officer is charged with the same crime. We'll get into that here in a few minutes. But in the case of a civilian can face criminal charges of wanton endangerment for pointing a firearm at somebody. And that's even if you don't shoot the person, or if you don't shoot at them, but just pulling a gun on someone or pulling a gun out can be considered wanton endangerment. And that's thought because of if you pull a gun out on somebody, it creates danger, and of course could be injury or death. If you fire warning shots at someone, so for instance, I had an incident, 2-3 years ago, when I was living in Louisville, old Louisville, I mean, where believe it or not, 2 o'clock in the morning, there was a white woman on my back porch, sleep. And if you wanted to believe it, I wanted to cause physical harm to her, because when I not so politely told her to leave, she cussed me out. And of course, I had the physical means to do to her whatever I wanted, and I chose to call the police. Of course, the police never came. That's a whole different story. Maybe we can do a Sankofa series on the timing of police calls. But the point I'm making is that um, if I had done something to threaten that woman, I probably could have easily been charged with wanton endangerment, even though I was on my own property. Um, Also, DUIs. So if you drive under the influence, that could result in wanton endangerment charges. If, say, for instance, the person in the car with you is at risk, and even if you don't get in a car accident, you are endangering your passenger just by being under the influence of alcohol or drugs while driving. Um, and so, even if you're not under the influence of alcohol or drugs, and you are engaging in reckless driving and you run another vehicle off the road per se, uh, even if the other person is not injured, you could be charged with that. So, in a nutshell, that's kind of where I'm going to be coming from as it pertains to wanton endangerment. And now that we kind of understand the facts and the legal scenarios regarding wanton endangerment, the one question I will challenge everybody to ask themselves is, are there any specific implications for wanton endangerment within the Black community? Well, we'll talk in a few minutes about um, a bill or an ordinance that's being put out there that may answer yes to that question. But that notwithstanding, what do you all think as regards to any specific issues or specific implications for the Black community as it pertains to wanton endangerment? Now, some of the questions I would ask myself if I was going about thinking about this would be, um, how many folks are charged or arrested for wanton endangerment in the Black community versus other communities? How many calls, we'll kind of get to that in a few minutes too, are made, and why are people making calls? Is it because they're fearful of the gunshots, or is it because they want to get individuals in trouble? Um, so we'll go through again all of these types of things, and again, it's very important for us to kind of understand what the implications are within our community, so that even though we protest or we lobby for specific bills or against certain ordinances or whatnot, us taking it into our own hands is always the best policy.
What was your question again? I'll type it and put it in the chat too.
Yeah.
I
So
did want to raise the
yeah, I want
just
people to just think about what, if anything, are specific implications of wanton endangerment in the Black community. Of course, we know about the Breonna Taylor murder, and we'll get into that, and Brett Hankerson. But I guess I want people to think about what has happened to them. Like, a lot of people talk about, like, I see these crimes, I see like wanton endangerment linked to other crimes, like, say, domestic violence or the like. And so I'm just trying to figure out if people think or even want to question if this particular law has special implications for us. Oh yeah, and by the way, Chanel, I think I got like 3 or 4 of my students on here. So I can't even see who's on there now. But I definitely don't mind calling them out.
Can you see them?
I could at first, but I can't now.
On your screen?
I just see a bunch of empty boxes.
Look down below.
Hold on. I am. But it's okay though. I guess if one of them wanted to say something, they would. But if nobody has anything on that, I did want to kind of switch gears then to the trial of Brett Hankison, and the charges of wanton endangerment that were issued to him, which was back in 2020, of course, as a result of the Breonna Taylor murder. It was Hankison that was charged with 3 counts of wanton endangerment for his actions that night. And that was the case, even though none of the shots that he fired struck, uh, actually struck Breonna Taylor, they say. Instead, interestingly enough, Hankinson did a bunch of moving around during this time physically that some of us have issue with, and it seems that the shots that he fired passed through the walls of Breonna's apartment and into another apartment. And in that other apartment, there were 3 people that were there, including the husband, a wife, and a child. And of course, none of those people were injured or hurt at all. But this actually made the point, and they continuously made this point on both sides, the prosecution and his side, continuously made the point that this trial was not about the death of Breonna Taylor. It was about the shots that were fired in that other apartment. And so, of course, Hankinson was fired as a result of the raid that they did. And according to the reports, he supposedly stood outside the apartment shooting into the apartment through a glass window. And throughout the trial, it was debated from both sides whether or not Hankinson, could actually see what he was shooting. And that's important because there were supposedly window blinds there obstructing his line of sight while he was shooting. And part of police protocol is that you are supposed to not shoot when you can't see. So Hankinson faced 3 charges of wanton endangerment for firing the weapon with extreme indifference to the value of human life, as the actual charge reads. Of course, he was found not guilty last month of these charges. And as his attorney, Stu Matthews, presented his closing arguments, he basically said that Breonna Taylor should not have died, but this case is not about her. He also claimed that the situation itself became unexpectedly dangerous, which I'm guessing he said that to try to give Hankinson a pass for his actions, saying that he acted in passion because shots were being fired and his partner had been shot. So Attorney General Barbara Whaley was, of course, on the other side prosecuting, and also commented that the this particular case didn't have anything to do with Breonna Taylor. And I think they kept bringing that up because they didn't want protesters to be upset because they knew they were not going to convict. They knew they were not going to convict Hankinson for wanton endangerment. So the prosecution, when it was their turn, they and this was after just 3 hours of deliberation that he was found out guilty. But the prosecution had asked, why did Hankinson say that he saw a figure with a gun? And if he did see that figure, why did he run away from the door without shooting? And to that, Hankinson had claimed that he was trying to get out of what they call the fatal funnel. Now, I had never heard of the fatal funnel before, but I'm not in policing. Now, some of my homeboys, some of my people are, and maybe they would know. But I understand that the fatal funnel is basically the line of fire that is still prevalent after someone has already went down. And so he was using this notion of being caught up in the fatal funnel as his reasoning for lightweight fleeing and then returning to another location to return fire, or at least that's how I took it. And so he said he saw flashing lights through that sliding glass, even though there were blinds blocking his view. And so he fired his weapon through the glass door. So another question that was asked by the prosecution, and that's asked by a lot of people, was that if there were 32 shots from 3 officers and investigators couldn't determine who shot Breonna the 6 times, why is only one person, Hankerson, being charged? And I don't think that question has necessarily been answered to this point or to this day. Another thing to think about too, and we learned this if we didn't already know it about grand juries, they are independent. And so it is the prosecutor who gets to choose what evidence to present in a grand jury case. And oftentimes, when cases go to the grand juries, they end up like this, especially if a police is charged. So I want to stop right there, Chanel, and see if anybody wants to ask any questions about or make any comments about the Hankerson trial. I know a lot of people, when we said we were going to be talking about this, they wanted to talk about Brett Hankerson's past. I don't know a whole lot about that, so I'm not at liberty to talk about it. But again, if anybody had any questions or comments about the Hankerson trial and Wanton Endangerment.
Yeah, so I found that link for you. What you can do is press the share button down below, and when you go to share your screen, you got to make sure you hit the button that says make sure the audio is playing. There is a question about that video that pertains to what that video is going to be talking about. A Facebook user says the new Metro Council ordinance about random gunshots, and that is absolutely it and pertains to the Brett Hankerson situation. Brett Hankerson's past is filled with total corruption and abuse. He has been known to set up community members, plant things on them, and many folks have named that he is completely dangerous and enjoys doing that. So making sure that he can produce these type of charges on those folks. What I think we also are talking about is qualified immunity. And this is the part where officers, regardless of where they sit at, do not get charged the same as the general public. But we have to remember in that as well, because I know a lot of people are like, well, it's the police. The police is an agency with the city, so a vendor of the city. They are not actually a permanent member of our government. And this is the reason why we continue to keep amplifying these political education pieces. You've got the 490 Project here who keeps amplifying that police contracts are ill-advised and always put together in a way that supports the police officers and their qualified immunity. But police officers aren't the only people that get qualified immunity. All civil servants do. So I wanted to bring that up because that always goes along with it, especially with his cases. Some more to his cases is just really being a sexual abuser and not making it to an offenders list.
Yeah, I find that interesting, but I'm glad you brought up the other part because I just lost my train of thought. But I think what I was
immunity.
Right. Because not only does this, offer him a chance as far as his charges go, but the other thing is, I would say that we should hold police to a higher standard based on the scope of their job and the scope of their training. And so if the police academy or police training is supposed to bring about better candidates for policing, then I don't see why we can't expect those candidates, once they graduate from the academy, to be on their best behavior, to be tip-top cops, for lack of a better term. But anyway, let's get to this video that I'm going to show regarding the new ordinance that someone just brought up. So if I just click on the video, like you said you said click share some type of way. Chanel. Chanel, you with me? You might be on mute.
We really want to make sure customers understand that they don't have to be steered by their insurance company to go where your insurance company tells you.
I'm hoping that folks can see this. It's just a news clip.
Know that when that insurance company calls you,
Dr. Holloway, we can't see it.
Oh, Lord.
Good evening, I'm Rick Bamboo.
Hi, Vicki George. The number of shootings in Louisville.
So you all could not see the screen I'm sharing?
No, sir, we cannot.
Okay. Well. Well, that's cool. The video that I was gonna show is just a news clip, and you can go to WDRB or wherever and find it. But it's about the newly proposed ordinance that would make it a crime, basically, to randomly fire your gun. And this was brought about, I believe, earlier this year. I think back in January. And this was an ordinance that is being proposed by Louisville Metro Council. And 3 Democrats on that council, Mulvihill, Hollander, and Nicole George, so from districts 10, 9, and 21 respectively, are all in support of this bill.
Okay, I'm back.
No, that's okay. I wasn't able to share the video.
You have to share the screen and then press the small button below it for the sound.
I may have messed that up, but I think most people probably are aware of it anyway and can easily go to, like I said, WDRB or whatever website and just take a look at what's being said. And I'm about to tell them anyway. So LMPD Lieutenant Judah said that the department supports the adoption of the ordinance because it's needed. He also says that shooting guns indiscriminately in populated neighborhoods defies common sense. Yet we deal with it every day. And so that right there gives me a reason to question, like, is this a problem that happens every day? And if so, I'm not denying that. But if that's the case, is there a better way to solve it than what is being proposed now? However, I think since 2003, since the merger, before the merger, it was illegal to fire a gun within city limits. And then after merger, the law kind of changed because the city limits were redefined. There are other cities in Kentucky that also have this law, including Lexington. And so there are a few exceptions to the rule as it pertains to this law on basically what is wanton endangerment. So the exceptions are you can shoot your gun when you are legally defending your person or property. Now, I want to urge people to recognize that that phrase right there is very, very arbitrary because of the word legally. When you are legally defending your persons or property. So you have to ask yourself the question of what is self-defense? Well, of course, we know about the stand your ground legislation, and Kentucky is a stand your ground state from what I understand. You have to be in threat. Someone has to be threatening you in order for you to defend yourself. Wanton endangerment is also acceptable by police, military personnel, or similar officers in the execution of their official duties or during training. Now, that again becomes arbitrary because when it says in the execution of their official duties, sometimes those lines can be very blurred. And so sometimes police may fire a weapon or brandish one, and it is in the role of their official duty. But the question is, did they need to brandish a firearm at that particular time? The next case is within a properly zoned and constructed indoor firing range. And we'll come back to that in a few minutes when we start talking about solutions to these particular ills. The next one is when legally hunting on at least 5 acres of open land. So now that is not arbitrary. Now, legal hunting, I guess, can be arbitrary, but in this case, they're telling you exactly what you have, where you have to be in order to be able to shoot your gun. The next exception is when engaged in target shooting, skeet shooting, sport shooting, or demonstration shooting on outdoor premises for which a written shooting permit has been obtained by the Department of Codes and Regulations. So going outside in the backyard with your gun, shooting at cans or bottles, stop signs, whatever, those things are no longer tolerated or will be no longer tolerated if this ordinance passes. Anyone that is found violating this ordinance could face misdemeanor charges, and if convicted, you could be fined up to $500 and serve up to a year in prison. I wanted to stop there, Chanel, and see if anybody had comments or questions.
Dr. Hall, we have a question for you.
What's up? Is that one of my students?
Yes, there's Lexi.
Lexi, what's up?
So I have a question. I know, like, back in 2020, the huge case was Breonna Taylor, and not a lot, like, protests were routing about, Black Lives Matter. But my question is, say that it was, another ethnicity, like, for example, I'm Puerto Rican. Do you think,
Okay.
in this case, like, as if, instead of Breonna Taylor was Black, imagine if she was Puerto Rican. Do you think there would have been more, like, the same significance happening as if, she was Puerto Rican versus, her being Black?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, Lexi. I think the answer to your question is, unfortunately, yes. Well, I don't know if that's unfortunate, but I think that a Puerto Rican sister would have, if she had died in the same way as Breonna Taylor did, I would imagine that the drawback from protesters would be similar, if not the exact same. I would say that, and I would think that Puerto Ricans would say that they faced very harsh relationships with police, and oftentimes, unfortunately, can be due to their closeness with us. But even when not, even as a standalone group, I think that basically anyone that is not white or specifically a white male in the U.S. That might face that same situation, I do believe that the cry for justice would have been just as loud. I hope that answers your question.
It did, thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Lexi's comment made me remember about like an incident that happened a really long time ago in Congress, where a Puerto Rican woman, uh, she shot in Congress. It was one of the few instances where there was a bullet fired inside the Capitol, and she was arrested for that. It was in protest with the quelling down in the 50s of all Puerto Rican identity and the Puerto Rican independence movement. And this woman's name was Lolita Lebron. So like it just made me remember that it doesn't really matter. Uh, well, it matters incredibly, but it still is important to acknowledge that the treatment of Puerto Ricans by the United States government has not been a kind one. After all, the island has been annexed, and rather than it being granted by the continuation government that arose in the 1895 war, what happened was that the Puerto Rico was annexed. So it made me remember that throughout the 50s, there were many people in the movement, Puerto Rican independence movement, and there are still all today many people who are classified as terrorists and are imprisoned in U.S. jails for charges that lasted decades, all because they've wanted the independence of their island, and in many cases, they've resisted that by arms. So, like, it just made me remember that. I'm sorry for going on a tangent.
No. That's what this is about, man. I appreciate your insight too. Is that David?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay. All right. Good to see you here, man. Yeah, it's good to see some of my students from my History 222 class coming on and asking questions and making statements. And I agree. I forgot about that case back in the 50s, but that's another one of those wanton endangerment type of situations. That of course, if you go into a government building, think about January 6th, even though we still kind of dealing with that. But if you go into a government building, especially if you are fighting for freedom for a quote unquote ethnic minority, then, of course, you're going to face some serious consequences. Any other conversation going back to
I was just gonna say that
ordinance?
an observation that I had about the Breonna Taylor case was that even with the wanton endangerment that occurred, which was set on Brett Hankinson, it was not because he was shooting at Breonna Taylor's apartment. It was more so because of the neighbors of Breonna Taylor, the reason for which he was given that charge.
Yeah.
The neighbors, shall I state, they were white. So, like, it kind of has to do with that long stain of the U.S. Laws, which some unfortunately applied more to some than others. And even then, with the Puerto Rican thing, it's really interesting. Now, there's a big fight in Puerto Rico about public land, including beaches, which are being bought up by white Americans fleeing, buying public land, and setting fences and preventing local Puerto Ricans of taking baths inside them. So, like, this is a long, sort of vast analysis.
Appreciate that, David. Definitely. Hey, Chanel, we got a question on here, but it's hard for me to understand what it's asking. It's from Angie Reed.
It's being rhetorical.
Oh, okay. So it's not technically a question.
No.
Okay. All right.
It's literally saying, and bringing up a point, when you take misdemeanors and then tack on the wanton endangerment, especially when we're talking about shooting a gun, period. Mm-hmm. Now the act of shooting a can in the backyard, which lots of folks actually do, becomes a felony.
Can't do it no more. Yeah, I mean, if this passes, that'll be something that we'll have to figure out how not to do. But definitely, I appreciate the conversation. I wanted to go back to an incident, Chanel, that happened in your favorite place, I don't know, you probably know about this already, but have you heard about what happened in Radcliffe? I think it was back in September, where a young man, I think he was like 30 years old. His name was Anthony Gray. He was I guess he was coming out of a hotel or something, and he ends up getting quote unquote unintentionally struck by a police officer, and it ended up breaking his leg and causing other injuries. Um, he was unarmed at the time, and he was charged with first degree fleeing and evading of police, along with third degree criminal trespassing and first and second offense of alcohol intoxication in public. And his charges were punishable by 1 to 5 years of prison if he's convicted, which he hasn't been yet. Um, but according to the lawsuit, because he did file a lawsuit, um, when Gray was when he was being arrested, one officer tried to grab him, and Gray turned away from him, or jacked away from him, as we would say in the hood, and was like, "I'm unarmed," and he tried to run. But when he tried to run, the other officer caught up with him in the car and basically hit him. And again, it ran over his leg. The incident was caught on body cam, and according to sources, it shows indisputably that his intent was the use of lethal force. And his intent was to use his police vehicle to arrest or to stop Gray from fleeing. Chanel, did you know about that case?
Yes, I did not know his name, but there's so many cases. There are so many cases that are not public and that come through our venue, so to speak, all the time. But yes, I did hear about that case.
And I wanted to bring that up in regards to wanton endangerment, because it seems like this would be a good time to charge police with that, if not attempted murder. But of course, we have to assume that that's not going to happen. But
well, we can assume that it's not going to happen, but we know we have to push for it for the reasons that I explained before: qualified immunity and their contract as a vendor with those city officers. People. I was just with a story with a family from Indiana around how police can erase your rights, and if we don't fight for them, if we don't say anything, keep saying that they always are going to do what they're going to do, when do we stop them from doing what they're going to do? They get paid with our taxpayer money. Mm-hmm. And so in turn, we are responsible for saying, hey, this is what we want as a public safety adherence. And what they're doing to Black and brown communities is causing more harm and death. So how do we amplify?
Yep, fight to power. And it's a nonstop situation, because, as you said, I could have easily looked up situations that have happened recently in Louisville for the same thing. We're just talking about wanton endangerment, not the host of other crimes that sometimes it seems like police get away with. In Bowling Green last year, there was a Latinx sister named Erica Ebenzosa, who was arrested after they attempted to pull her over in Bowling Green, and they clocked her at going 105 in a 55-mile construction zone, which of course is illegal. But she led them on a police chase for several miles, and there was a passenger in the car with her. She pulled the car over, let the passenger out, and kept on going along with the police chase. And of course, according to reports, she was swerving, driving recklessly, and she hit another vehicle in the process. Finally, when they were able to get her to stop, of course, by force, they removed her out of the vehicle, and the sister went about telling them that she had issues of bipolar, mental disorders. And I think that the records show that there was something going on because she talked about killing the state trooper and his family. She also told the officer that she had COVID and she was coughing all over them and saying they were going to die. Eventually, she's being charged with 3 counts of wanton endangerment. Now, she's been actually charged with wanton endangerment of a police officer, which is a more serious charge, and along with terroristic threatening and fleeing or evading police, along with several other driving-related charges. And again, this was in Bowling Green. So I brought this up because we oftentimes don't have that necessary conversation about mental health, especially in the Black and brown communities. And so oftentimes we assume that a person is fine or a person is okay. But then if you check a person's behavior or actions that they do, it suggests that maybe something is not right, or maybe there are some issues going on there. My fear, though, and I guess my complaint, is that too often police pay zero attention or little to no attention to the mental health of someone that's being detained or arrested, and rather than offer mental health type of assistance, which oftentimes or more times than not they're not trained to do, we offer jail time, and then the issue itself doesn't get fixed, and then this person becomes a victim of recidivism. Any comments about Miss Abranzosa or Mr. Gray?
I did want to bring up a point around a solution. I know somebody from the comment, and I thought we were going there with this.
Oh, we going there next. We're going there next.
Okay.
We're going there next. But go ahead.
Oh. Was when you mentioned having to need to call the police at the time for that person, and they mentioned that they had to. What you brought up was a reason why we most likely don't call the police. One, you brought up that they didn't come. They most likely don't. Lots of people have said that, especially this week with a response around a lot of different things where people are still amplifying that policing works. And we need to make sure that, and I remember we said we're going to have some definitions for people too. When we say police, we mean policing as the verb. So action steps, what it means to police somebody. And this is what we're talking about. When a lot of folks are naming police, they mean it as a noun, a person, place, or a thing. And they are talking about an entity. We are not talking about that entity. We're talking about policing. And so the only reason why police even show up is if they are in the vicinity. And most places they are not in the vicinity. Police's main job is to protect property and to protect the property owner. And so that is where it gets complicated on their end, not so much, right? On our understanding is the complication. But they will do whatever they need to do to protect that property in that area. So of course, we're going to see a lot of corruption around like these laws. So I'm glad we're talking about wanton endangerment, because if you can name that a place needs policing, and you can also name that a place is violent, then you can make sure that you increase some type of funding for that space, which is what they do. But we did want to mention that calling the police on people is not a thing to do, and it has put people in jail who don't deserve to be in jail. One, people who are mentally ill and may have a mental illness situation that is happening. I'm glad that there are different situations that are occurring where organizations are creating a different call so that you can call. New York is creating a new quick line to call, just like 911, 311, 211, all of those things. I think there's this 933 around, and I'm not for sure if that's correct or not, but I will find it, to call if somebody needs some support or whatever. What we want you to do is start building out what community care and safety looks like for community defense. Everything that we've been discussing is talking about like how we can make sure that we are defending ourselves in our community, but making sure that we take preventative measures. And so get with folks that you care about, that care about you, and work out a community safety plan. I'm gonna say at this point, I'll let joking about, you know what I'm gonna do now. Somebody don't know what you're gonna do, and when the time happens, most of the time you don't do it. And I'm just naming that and not being petty, but because you go into flight or fight mode, and sometimes fight can also be very dangerous for yourself. So, what does it look like having a safety plan for those around you? And when something happens to you, is there somebody that you can call to be a third party to help mediate the situation? Are you all taking mediation classes or any transformative justice classes so that you can learn what it looks like to maintain a healthy relationship when conflict arises?
Good stuff. And that leads us right into the next part of the conversation to kind of wrap it up, which is what is the solution to community violence? What is community violence? First of all, I would say community violence are things that we're talking about. And sometimes people like to relate that to black on black crime. And I don't even know what that is for what it's worth. But what I do know is that unfortunately, violence takes place in certain communities more than others. And when that's the case, we as the community have to come together and, like you said, Chanel, figure out how to solve whatever issues they are, while at the same time fighting for it from the legal standpoint. So when we ask the question, "What is community violence?" is anything that brings harm or danger to a particular neighborhood or to a group of people. And so, me personally, I look at gentrification as community violence. I look at not only police brutality, but the prison industrial complex, all of these things as community violence as well. So when we talk about solutions, and I appreciate you, Chanel, for the solutions that you gave. Uh, oh, hold on. One thing before I get to solutions. Chanel, you heard of this House Bill 690?
First of all, there are so many bills. What is 690?
This is the one where they're saying now that the lawyers could bring the gun into the courtroom.
Yeah, sure have.
Yeah. This was just introduced, I think, a couple of days ago. And I find it to be very interesting. But the point is to have this ordinance to where lawyers and other court officials, because I think judges can already have one on their person, but other attorneys, I don't think, have been granted that right. And so this is the opportunity, I guess, to try to make that happen. And it just it bothers me because when you start arming everyone, that tells us the type of society that we're living in. But at the same time, as a person who wants to be safe, you want to be armed. But I don't know. Any thoughts on that particular thing? I think it's House Bill 690.
Yeah. So many times today that I'm speaking for myself and not as a particular organization or any group or whatever. I know a lot of times we are jokingly prepared about voting, but if we do not do the necessary steps that it takes for voter outreach and engagement, then you get these crazy ass crackers that are out there in the boonies wanting to enforce these laws. I can guarantee you that there was no one from an urban district or from a city that is being riddled by gun violence that wanted to do that. And when we talk about gun violence, I'm not putting a particular color on the gun violence,
Right.
because we know that gun violence has always been enacted with colonizations. And so colonizers, and I mean hoogies, are the ones that are actually producing these type of weaponized manifestations around like where this violence can take place. They know good and damn well ain't nobody been in nobody's courtroom where somebody needed a gun as the defending party. And I mean like a lawyer, regardless if you're defending the state, somewhere in the prosecution or some type of defendant. That has not taken place whatsoever. There are sheriffs that sit at every courthouse. You have to go through a metal detector to where you can't carry a gun. So why am I going to trust some crazy ass lawyer who's in there probably defending the police or somebody else with a gun in the first place. It's not going to make anybody feel safe whatsoever. And then the fact that they have not engaged the community about that as a need, again, makes people not want to choose the right people to put in office, because either people are irrationally picking up types of topics and issues to fight behind, and ignoring and distracting from what we really need. So I look at it as a distraction. We are in a veto period. We need to be strategic about what type of bills are trying to be paid, which ones are distractions from some of the larger ones that are altering our amendment because they can't get a ratification. And that's the reason why they're doing that.
That's what I was gonna say too. Yeah, this is they say that this is an attempt to try to slide something in at an opportune time. But I want to wrap up, Chanel, by at least addressing some issues, and I'll leave you to talk about defund. But community policing, I think, is a good one. If we're going to have police, I think that they should be interactive with our communities, and I think they should have both sides should have stake if they're going to be interactive. And I think that community policing situations can, not always, but can lend themselves to an officer actually knowing an individual that is being blamed for a crime, or even that commits a crime. But if you know that individual, then you might know something about them that might make you treat them a little bit differently than you would if you just didn't know them and just assumed they were just the average criminal. I brought this up before. Mental health awareness is very important. And people say it's very important nowadays, but it's always been important. We just are now starting to pay attention to it. And especially with us in the Black community, we haven't always paid attention to it in the right way. I think that, and that's why I brought the situation up about the sister out in Bowling Green, because so many times people with mental health illnesses don't have those facts paid attention to. And then they're arrested, treated as a criminal, and then these issues don't get fixed, and then the community's still not safe. The last thing I'm gonna say, and then Chanel, I'll leave it to you. Man, Pimp C said it back in the day, man, don't pull that gun out unless you're gonna shoot somebody with it. Now I think, unfortunately for him, he might have had a situation way before he died where he actually did the opposite of what he said and ended up getting in trouble for it. But the point is, nowadays, especially with the new laws, you want to be real careful pulling your piece out, just in general. Even if you just want to New Year's Eve shoot that thing in the air, you don't rethink that. It's not the smart play nowadays. Matter of fact, you said this, Chanel, I believe, on New Year's Day, did you not? About people wasting bullets. Was that you? You did say that.
Yeah, I did say that.
Yeah.
And I meant that because we do not know what the extent of the alt-right is doing. We don't even know the extent of right of center is doing. And if you are going to arm yourself because we have these extremists taking place, then you're wasting bullets. I can understand practicing and things like that and doing things as far as gun safety, knowing trigger points and stuff. But it just doesn't make any sense that we are continuing this leisurely way around utilizing firearms. And so to amplify those pieces, okay, I got you, Lex. To amplify those pieces, there are people in the community who are teaching gun safety. If the state has no longer made it mandatory for you to get a firearm and go to a gun safety class or firearm training, actually go to one. It will definitely change your life. It will also help you be safe. We also have to remember that kids see the usage of firearms everywhere, and it looks different for them. They see them in television shows, they see them in cartoons, they see them playing everywhere. They're in the toy aisle, and we are still amplifying this glorification around what firearms are and not necessarily talking about what they do. And then we hear about what they do in very leisurely ways too. It isn't just rap music or pop music that talks about how, you can take somebody's life with a gun. It is in all music around like what happens when people using firearms. And we are still watching, even in a pandemic, people do multiple public shootings all the time. So definitely take gun training classes. I will make sure the next time when we leave the outro, we'll have those community resources there as a video, and you will have them. We'll try to make sure that we just keep adding them on as we talk about these different topics and stuff. Lex asked, why has mental health has been a taboo subject to talk about? Because people don't want to name that they crazy. I just want to say it like that first. And then we also don't want the shame that it means to be ill. Regardless of how ill you are, whether it's cancer, mental health, or whatever else, people just think that being ill really makes you very shameful. And that's because we live in capitalism. Capitalism doesn't value sick people, or doesn't even look at illness as a way to benefit our scientific community, which lots of other natural communities, indigenous communities, as well as very industrialized communities do. And that is really one of the main topics. We definitely don't want to address how they have made it just a skeptical around people with mental health issues are utilizing gun violence as an easy way to make a statement for help. And it's not saying like they came up with this idea. It's just like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. It is embedded in our culture around violence to attack people with firearms and utilize them. So when you break, the fastest weapon that you think of is going to be a firearm. Nobody's going to get a baton. Nobody's going to get a Joe. Nobody's going to get a knife and think about the ways that you do those things to harm people. It's just like with ways that people harm themselves to end their life. They utilize gun because it's faster, and they know that. And it just is now this thing around that. It's probably in a study somewhere. We don't have that. I might look at that later. Megan says, often police officers get assigned a mentor or someone who has been in the police agency for a while. Do you think that the mentor implants a belief that all Black people are bad? If so, do you think Walker's mentor should charge or at least remove his badge and gun? If police departments were put together in a way that they were preventative, then maybe, yeah. But we have to remember that it wasn't until post World War II where we began having these white picket fences conversation, the American dream conversations. And in those conversations were the aspects of our community and how safety would look. Knowing that in other war-torn countries after that, they were really moving through a revolution. Now, what does life look like? How do we proceed in life? We didn't have that here in the US. And so they were able to manipulate and use propaganda of the American dream and pushed us that safety would be taking place by the police. The police began using contracts because of their corruptness after being used as slave catchers for municipalities, large wealthy landowners, which are still municipalities, just small countries. I mean, with capitalism, right? A corporation or any type of business is only a small nation state. You employ people, you use people's labor to produce whatever it is that you want to produce. You produce laws within your company so that people abide by them, and then people build this culture around it. So that's where we are. The culture within law enforcement is to manipulate and deceive. And there's just no other way around that. They can buy as many socks and bikes and coats all they want to for poor communities. They are still being governed by very corrupt people. Your police chief is only a PR rep. And so looking for that person to hold leadership is false when we know that there are other people inside who are building this culture, your trainers, these people, these mentors around what it is that they want to see. And so I lightweight applaud people who go into law enforcement and do fight against that. But we have seen time and time again, those people who go against the status quo within law enforcement get punished the harshest, and their pensions get taken.
Yeah, and basically, Megan, what she's saying is kind of what we talked about in class the other day with systemic versus individual racism. So we look at police departments and we talk about policing and we say it's racist, or we call it out for that. We're talking about the system itself that not only breeds that mentality, but allows for individual racism to prevail. And so when you ask if that person has a mentor, the answer is yes, but the mentor is the system. It doesn't have to be an individual person to come along and say, hey, all Black people are bad. It's a system that almost proves to itself that all Black people are bad. And as Chanel alluded to, there's a financial benefit that the system gets by treating black and brown people this way. It's after 7:30, so I know we probably have to shut it down. But I appreciate all my students and everybody else out there that came today to be a part of this conversation. What's the next topic, Chanel?
The next topic, and I'm trying to head over to my brand, but something's going on with my Wi-Fi. I'm in the West End, so y'all know how it is. Be able to look out for that on Invest Divest. So tired of that. But the next topic is, I'm gonna have to pull it up in the folder. I'm gonna have to find the pictures.
I want to say it's oh man, it's got.
I got it right here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, y'all. It's the use of force reporting. Yep.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know.
Use of force reporting. Yeah, I can't wait to talk about that next week.
One of our main demands that city officials, including our Metro Council, so the people that are over representative of city citizens, and our city's admin, mayor's office, never address until we force them to. Literally got to force them to. Use of force.
And I may even talk a little bit about CRBs there too, civilian review boards.
Absolutely, I like that. Let me make sure I edit that for next week. I ain't got no pen on me. Okay. Okay, cool. Thank y'all for tuning in. I wish I could amplify the music and have us a nice, great outro, but we'll see you next time. If you'd like to ask questions, you can do them in the comment. If you want to join on screen, we only have a limited amount of folks that can join on stream, but we can definitely grab your comments when you ask them and push them up there. I don't think I see any towards the end of this, and we will see you next week, same time, and with some more resources too, so that you all can look that up.
All right, appreciate it, Chanel.
Most def.
I appreciate everybody for showing up.
All right, and in the broadcast.